Okay, it's 12:30. It's a lovely sunny day. My name's David Little. I'm the Chief Executive of the TCM Group, and it gives me a real pleasure to welcome all of you to today's TCM webinar, Taking the Grief Out of Grievance. And today we're going to be focusing on how organisations, people, the whole organisation can change the way that we think about handling conflicts, disputes, disagreements, feuds, falling out, bullying, harassment, discrimination. It goes by so many different names, but every time we look at this issue of conflict, it throws up real challenges for organisations. None more so, I believe, than the traditional systems for resolving disputes, the grievance procedure. The grievance procedure, a process which I personally believe, rather than resolving disputes in the workplace, paradoxically, actually makes matters much worse. It complicates issues, it confuses people, it creates uncertainty, it creates stress, it creates anxiety, and actually rather than resolving disputes, it seems to take our parties and pull them apart and tears the heart out of a good working relationship. And then we ask them to get back together and try and work effectively as an engaged, productive, high-performing member of our team. So today we're going to look at alternative systems for this. The traditional grievance process, in my humble opinion, is no longer fit for purpose. And today's webinar will be questioning the efficacy and the validity of the grievance procedure. But more importantly today, what we're going to be doing is looking at alternatives to the grievance procedure. And we'll be listening to some speakers and some case studies, and I'll be sharing with you some insights about how organizations can make the shift from grievance to resolution and focus instead on the people rather than the policy, the process, and the procedure. The 3 Ps, the dreaded 3 Ps, policy, process, and procedure. And I'll be arguing today, and again, I think we'll be listening to some great case studies, that the 3 Ps, policy, process, and procedure, do not make your people happier. They do not make your people more engaged. They do not create stronger, more collaborative, more supportive relationships. They do not drive better customer service. Yet we apply the 3 Ps as soon as we see there's a problem in the workplace. Today we're going to be focusing on people. People. How can we create a space for people to have a conversation, a dialogue, to listen, to be heard, to engage in empathy, understanding, to gain insight, to find a way through, to find a resolution to the problems that they're experiencing in the workplace. You may hear I'm a bit croaky today. I was presenting yesterday at an NHS board and my voice just about held up for the day. I've been hoping it will hold up for today's webinar. I've got my fingers crossed that it will. I've got a little bit of laryngitis that just seems to be a bit tricky to shift. So forgive me if I'm sounding a bit hoarse today. So the webinar is going to last about an hour. There's loads of time for questions and answers through this. At any time, please feel free to ask us questions. The webinar is being recorded, so we'll put it up. Just to check, yes, I have pressed the record button. So we'll be putting it up on our YouTube channel. We'll also put it onto our Vimeo channel. We'll also put it on our website, and we'll send you out a link to the webinar so you can share this with your colleagues and in your HR team, and your management teams, and elsewhere across your organisation. As I said, there's an opportunity for questions throughout. Anything you'd like to know, but didn't ever dare ask about grievances, conflict management, mediation, dispute resolution, this is the best form to do it. Please ask away. Really happy to take questions. You've got a little dialogue box. You may have used this system before. There's, in the console, there's a box there. Please put your question in. We'll keep coming back to them. And I love answering questions, and we will make sure we try and answer as many as possible. So a number of you may have heard me talk before about resolution and the resolution policy. I've updated the resolution policy very recently. You'll receive, from this webinar today, a free updated version of the resolution policy. So not only is the resolution policy suitable now for replacing the grievance procedure, it's also suitable now for replacing your bullying, harassment, and your disciplinary procedures. Yes, you heard it here first. An alternative to the traditional disciplinary procedure. We'll focus on this more over the course of today, but we'll be looking at how we can drive a heart of resolution across this span, the range, the rafter of our ER and HR systems, with a focus on solutions, on positive collaborative outcomes. So please sit back, enjoy. I hope you have a good webinar today. I try and make them as fun and lively as I can, even without or with a croaky voice. So a little bit about me and TCM, just so you know who I am. I'm David, obviously. I'm the CEO of the TCM Group, the founder. If you cut me in half, but please don't, you'll see I'm a mediator through and through. So prior to setting up TCM, I ran a charity specialising in mediation and restorative justice. I then established the TCM Group in 2001, TCM Total Conflict Management. It's about integrating conflict management systems into organisations. TCM don't do initiatives. Organisations have had enough initiatives on bullying and harassment to last them a lifetime. We change the systems, the process, the culture, the framework by which conflicts happen, and we transform the nature of conflict from destructive to constructive. We can't do that with an initiative. We embed and integrate our approach within our organisations. We would like to think we're leaders in the field. People tell us that we are. We have a global team. We have a head of resolution services, a head of investigation and audit services who take care of those two functions within the business. We have a team working out of the Business Design Centre in London, and we have consultants working across the UK and indeed globally. We've got some work in the United Arab Emirates in early July, training up investigators in a petrochemical company. So we work across the globe, spreading the word of constructive dispute resolution and also better employee relations. We've won awards. We're shortlisted for HR and L&D consultancy at the CIPD People Management Awards this year, which we're very proud of. We were a mediation provider of the year last year in the National Mediation Awards. We've launched policy frameworks, models, systems, and we've trained many hundreds, if not thousands, of managers, HR and leaders to resolve disputes more effectively. As I mentioned, I was at a trust board yesterday doing this work with them. It was great. I'm writing a second book at the moment, a book called Managing Culture. So if anyone on the webinar would like to share with me best practice on transforming your culture from a formalized, traditional, process-led culture to a person-centered, values-based culture, I'm aligning my book to the new CIPD HR profession map. And I'm looking for case studies and examples of best practice of evidence-based, principles-led, outcomes-oriented organisational cultures. My first book, published by Kogan Page with the CIPD, was Managing Conflict. I've put this quote up here from Michael Gibbons, because some of you may remember he reviewed the dispute resolution regulations back in 2007 and was the precursor to really a shift or an attempted shift in public policy towards resolution in the country. I won't say too much on public policy other than woefully inadequate and shambolic, but I'll get off my fence at some point during the webinar. But we had an opportunity in the UK to really concentrate on bringing people together through mediation, and opportunities have been missed over the last 10 years, and it's enormously frustrating as a mediator to see how successful mediation is, yet to see public policy continually driving towards more litigation-inspired and formal processes. So our systems, as I said, is a whole systems approach for changing the way that organisations think about conflict and the management of conflict and change, building collaborative communities driven by a common purpose and a set of core values. So we help take the values off the lobby wall, off the email signature, off the occasional mug, and we integrate those values into the HR policy framework, into the leadership and management capabilities and competences. We help bring the values to life, the golden thread that runs through the organisation. We help to develop those HR and ER policy frameworks that become more values-based and person-centred. We create values-based, person-centred management and leadership capabilities and deliver training against that. And we help to integrate all of these principles and processes across the whole of the organisation using a very evidence-based collaborative system. And these are just some of the organisations that we've been working with. And I'm delighted to say that we have Sarah Buckley from Weve today. Someone just said that the slides aren't out. The slides aren't changing. Thank you so much. I pressed pause on the slides, so my slides aren't changing. So thank you so much, Caitlin, for mentioning that your slides aren't changing. Hopefully I haven't missed too much. You saw a picture of me, but you can see the video of me there. And I also introduced the TCM system, which I'll go back to just really quickly, so forgive me. That's the TCM system, which I was talking about earlier. And that's available on our website, and I'll send that information about the TCM system as well. So hopefully I haven't missed too much, and thank you, Caitlin, for mentioning that. So these are some of the organisations, and we'll be talking, as I said, to Sarah Buckley from Weve, talking about their experiences. And we also have Jonathan Goodyear today, who've been working with for the last year or so, maybe even 18 months, who's been embedding resolution in a number of his organisations he's been working with. And we first met when he was working at TSB last year. So I'm looking forward to hearing from our two case studies today as well. So let's look at how conflict is managed and some of the challenges and problems that we see in the management of conflict within organisations with whom we work. So conflicts happen. Conflict is an inevitable, unavoidable, inescapable fact of life. In fact, I would argue that conflict is a healthy expression of a healthy, high-functioning organisation. But we've become very scared of conflict. We become very worried about conflict. We see conflict as a risk, as a threat, as something to be nervous about. In fact, we become very skittish around conflict. People avoid it. In fact, I often see when I'm working with organisations, two strategies for managing conflict: extensive extensive inaction, or expensive overreaction. And it's in the middle that we need to work. It's the action. And often those things, the inaction or the overreaction, stifle the action. So we have our parties here in conflict. So what we do first of all is we go and do GBH on them. Grievance, bullying, harassment, grievous bodily harm. And this is the point where our parties are in a conflict, where what we should be doing in our organisations is promoting and encouraging dialogue between our parties. And a couple of lines in a grievance procedure saying informal resolution, by the way, doesn't cut the mustard when it comes to dealing with the complex emotional, psychological and behavioural issues that we might be facing within that relationship. But what we do is we apply a policy, a grievance procedure, a bullying procedure, a harassment process that formalises the conflict. It polarises the parties. It pulls the heart out of it. It's toxic. It's damaging. Those processes damage the relationship. And instead of bringing our parties together and promoting collaborative problem solving, empathy, engagement, dialogue, compassion, it creates dogma, entrenchment, pulling apart. A feud becomes a major escalated disagreement between the parties. And I would hope that in time to come, organisations where we're not allowed to smoke in our organisations, we won't be allowed to take a grievance procedure. I would call for a wholesale universal ban of the grievance procedure in UK organisations. It is corrosive, it's divisive, it's damaging. It offers no benefits to anyone other than a mirage of justice and a tick in a box of compliance, of consistency and procedural fairness. But if our organisations get the best out of their people through compliance, consistency and procedural fairness, then we should continue. But we have to ask ourselves, why is our workforce so disengaged? Why are our workforce so unhappy in the workforce? Why is the UK one of the most unproductive economies in the G12? As we stand on the brink of global greatness following the 31st of October, we can't be globally great with our people sat at home watching Homes Under the Hammer because of a feud with their colleague and with their boss. We need a new paradigm and a new way of thinking of these problems. And what we see is it pulls people apart and it becomes binary. Our thinking becomes binary. And the policies that exist within our organisations, they too are binary. They operate on a basis of 50 plus 1% balance of probability. Our focus is more on passing the Birchall test in the employment tribunal than it is on how do we resolve the issue between our two parties in a conflict. And if we focus on the litigation and we inspire our processes through quasi-litigation inspired mechanisms, then that encourages the entrenchment and the polarity between the parties. They create fear, uncertainty and harm. And when I speak to people about the stress and the anxiety, the worry, the fear, the sleepless nights, the insomnia, the relationship breakdown, they tell me, David, it's because I'm not being listened to. My relationship with my boss, with my colleagues, with my team isn't being addressed constructively. That's causing me the stress. Yeah, when I look at organisations' well-being and stress management programs, conflict management seems to be in absentia. Yet, in my experience, the relationship between conflict is the biggest cause of stress, anxiety, and damage to well-being. So conflict in the workplace damages well-being, it undermines engagement, and it damages productivity. And so therefore, arguably, the management of conflict should be a central tenet of the people and culture strategy, of the organisation's stated strategy. But when I go into organisations, and this is changing, but when I go into organisations and I ask, can I see your conflict strategy? Can I see where conflict management sits within your people and an OD strategy or your people and culture strategy? It doesn't exist. And our failure to take conflict management seriously and to treat it as a strategic priority means, in my view, that we consistently fail to address the issues at root cause. And it has an incredibly expensive impact, both in terms of time and money for individuals within the workplace and for our workplaces as a whole. And part of, I guess, introducing the resolution policy is about understanding the real cost of conflict to our organisations. But sometimes it's tens of thousands, sometimes it's hundreds of thousands. But for some of you, I'm sure you'd been in conflicts that have been through the courts, through the tribunals, where you could be almost pushing into the hundreds of thousands or indeed even more. And that doesn't include the cost of the NDAs, non-disclosure agreements, and the settlement agreements, which we know are gaining a really bad press at the moment as a system for actually masking the real underlying issues within our organisations. Our systems for resolving conflict are often shockingly poor. Yeah, we apply them in the hope that they'll work. But again, when I do conflict audits and resolution reviews with organisations, less than 10% of cases that go through these formal processes result in any action being taken against the alleged wrongdoer or the person against the complaint, whom the complaint's been raised. So in 90% of cases that have been raised through these formal processes, the parties are left being told, well, sorry, but you're a liar. Well, we might not say you're a liar. We might say on the balance of probability, and there was not enough available evidence at the time. We weren't able to find a case, and we weren't able to take any action. Or we might say, look, sorry, can't discuss it with you. It's confidential. And if you discuss it with anyone else, you'll be subject to disciplinary action. What the individual hears is, sorry, I had a legitimate complaint about that person, and you've told me not taking action. Therefore, ergo, I'm a liar. And off they walk. And the labour market allows them to do that. They take their skills, their knowledge, their skills, their training, and enter the labour market, and off they go. So suddenly our spike in our attrition levels. So we've got our engagement levels are down, our productivity levels down. It's impacted on people's well-being, and suddenly our attrition levels are going up. And if you don't believe me, go and pull some files out of your HR files and look at some of the grievances from the last 12 months. They tell the story. I'm just highlighting the story. Those people in your organisations, they will tell a far more powerful story than I am. But things are changing. You know, we know that HR is being disrupted. HR, you know, the Lucy Adams stuff, you know, Terry Pims, myself. But it's also now happening from within the HR community. And I think that's really powerful. This is really important because the CIPD, and particularly Peter Cheese, has been talking for a long time about a bonfire of the policies and a shift towards a more person-centered human approach. But the new HR profession manual launched last October, for me, is inspiring and drives and sees a real shift in the way that the HR profession think about the rules and regulations that exist in their organisations, and focus instead on how they can bring people together to create values-based, person-centric models that drive collaborative work and that empower individuals, that promote compassion and empathy, and all of the attributes that I believe are important to the good working within an organisation. So conflict is a choice. It's a choice I make as an individual when I'm in conflict. It's a choice that our organisations make. And for some reason, we've become addicted to the wrong choices. We've become addicted to the lard of conflict management. And it's clogging up our arteries. It's giving us heart attacks. It's giving us all of the physiological problems of eating too much lard. It's happening in our organisations right now. And we're making the wrong choices. So I see dysfunctional, destructive, damaging conflict as an unhealthy diet. And we've just got addicted to it. There is another diet that's out there, the Mediterranean diet, the sardines, delicious. The olive oil, sitting on the Mediterranean, dipping our toe in the sea, relaxed. It's constructive, it's about dialogue, it's about being happier, healthier, more engaged in the problem-solving process, having an open mind and seeing this as an opportunity, not as a threat. And what I hope this webinar does today in the resolution policy is it offers up an alternative system for resolving disputes, which drives functional conflict of the kind I'm describing here. Because if all we do is we offer people destructive conflict, if all we have in our toolkit is a hammer, then every person in our organisation is a nail. And I don't think employees are nails. They want something more sophisticated. Caitlin, you've asked, you agree with everything I say, thank you. However, there will be a select few people that will take comfort from the formal process. How do you propose getting those that are most resistant on board? Well, I think that's absolutely right. But I think the first thing to do is to ask them, what do you need? And when I ask people what they need, they tell me some really simple things. They need to feel trusted. They need to feel respected. They need to feel valued. They need to feel heard. They need to feel included and engaged. They need to feel treated with dignity and respect. So I asked them, okay, well, let's look at the processes that are most likely going to give you those needs, help you to achieve the needs, the trust, the respect, the dignity, the being heard. And we can look at the formal processes, also known as abrogation of responsibility to a higher authority. where actually we don't get any of those needs met, other than this perceived mirage of justice that this higher authority will tell me I'm right and that you're wrong. But they won't do that because the evidence suggests that's not what happens. Or we can engage in some process of conversation and dialogue supported by the organisation, where it becomes culturally normalised for us and for our people to actually speak and to listen, to be empathetic, to sit in a room and have a conversation, where we can talk about how we feel and we can feel that we've been heard, where we can talk about our needs, we can build stronger relationships. And actually, when we present that to those individuals, Caitlin, they say to me, I'll take that every time. I'll take dialogue every time. How can we make that happen? And then what's really peculiar, what's really interesting to me, is dialogue is atypical in our organisations. Dialogue as a mediator, as a coach, as a manager, as a leader, as a trainer of leaders, dialogue is every time the best way to resolve an issue. It's the only way to resolve an issue. Yet when I look at organisation systems, processes, the culture, the structure of our organisations, we've designed dialogue out. We've designed formality and bureaucracy and risk aversion and processes in favour of dialogue. So when those parties tell me, David, I need these things, I'm like, yeah, I'm buying into this. I then look at the system that they're working with it. And dialogue doesn't exist within the system, so they can't choose that. So they begin to behave badly. And this is the curious thing. This is the curious thing. I don't blame those people for behaving badly. We shouldn't blame them for behaving badly. They're behaving the way the organisation has told them to behave. If the organisation has a paternalistic culture where we tell rather than show, whether we design out dialogue, where we are fearful and skittish around conflict, where we're afraid of some of the issues that might come up through strong feelings, where snot and tears pouring from people's faces strikes fear into the heart of managers because they've never been trained on how to deal with strong emotion. When those issues happen, people behave badly. It's not their fault. It's the organization's fault. If we want people to behave better, if we want people to be more engaged, more productive, happier, healthier, and stay with us longer, we have to change the systems. We have to change the processes. I'm inspired by the work of Martin Seligman and others involved in the School of Positive Psychology. There's some really interesting methodologies developing that I think are really valuable through neuroscience, appreciative inquiry, and here positive psychology. So we're moving from fight and flight, defend and attack, the paradigm of win and lose, towards bringing people together. A flow of empathy, of ideas, of dialogue, of innovation, of inspiration, whereby we can be the best we can be. And the organisation allows people to be the best that they can be by creating the conditions for flow. And flow is incredibly powerful. When we're in flow, a state of flow, we have the resource, the knowledge, the skills, the confidence to be the best we can be. But when we're in conflict, it inhibits flow between the relationship. So I look at flow both in human being terms, but also in relational terms. And I challenge organisations when we go to our policies and procedures and truly critique the policies and procedures, particularly the GBH policies, grievance, bullying, harassment policies. There's no flow in there. It's a flow to the tribunal. It's a flow of escalation. And when I say to organisations, HR and leaders, would you agree with me that empathy is an important attribute in terms of how we might resolve problems? And people absolutely nod vehemently. Emotional intelligence, social intelligence, conversational intelligence, absolutely. We buy into this, David, absolutely. Great. Let's look at your policy frame. Let's get the drains up on your policies. The word empathy doesn't exist. Dialogue's being designed out. The system doesn't promote or engage parties in any form of conversation in a meaningful sense. Yet we agree, and everyone would nod, that these characteristics are important. Yet they don't exist in the traditional policy framework that we have. So we've got the opportunity for some questions, and I can see, Caroline, you've asked a question here as well. So despite the best intention to resolve issues through dialogue, some employees just want a payoff to resort to grievance process rather than dialogue to get what they want. Any advice if there was no grievance process to resort to? Absolutely. Well, if there's no grievance procedure to resort to, then there is no grievance procedure to resort to. They go into a resolution process, and through the resolution process identify the most suitable remedy and route to resolution for those individuals. And again, they just want a payoff. But when I speak to people who codify in the conflict in financial terms, they tell to me, David, I just want the behaviour to stop, David. I just want them to stop doing what they're doing. I want them to listen to me. I want them to treat me with some respect. I want them to engage me in the team. I can't talk to them. I don't know what to do. And I've spoken to people and they'd say, get out there. My loved ones are telling me, get out there. Yeah, I want to get out. I want some money. But what I really need, I love the job. I enjoy the job. This is why I joined the company. I buy into the company's ethos and values. I don't want to leave, but I've got no choice. I've got a gun against my head. So people are talking, they codify in financial terms. But when we really sit down and give them a jolly good listening to, which is what I'd recommend we do, Caroline, let's go. Let's take that person and give them a jolly good listening to. What's really going on for you right now? What do you really need? And what can we do together, collaboratively, to help you to achieve that need to be met? And if that need is ultimately to exit the company, then of course, yeah, that's as it should be. But there is so much more we could be doing if we were to be able to engage in a more positive approach. So thank you, David, Caroline, for your answer. What if they refuse to talk or are unable to do so due to mental health issues? We've all got mental health issues, and conflict exacerbates those. The stress, the anxiety, the depression, the fear, the fury. It all happens in conflict. So we all have mental health issues in conflict. It's going on. It's happening. So we need to talk to people and listen to them. And dialogue is an interesting one because our values is interesting about dialogue. Dialogue is key. To the resolution policy, dialogue is absolutely vital. Dialogue is mandatory. How can we work in an organization and not talk to each other, particularly at times of conflict and challenge? So for the resolution process to work, dialogue isn't a nice optional extra that we'll go into if we feel like having a bit of a chat. Dialogue is a key fundamental function of the effective organization. So dialogue at the point within the resolution procedure isn't an optional extra, it's a mandatory requirement within the organization because it's aligned to the organization's values. It's how we work, it's what we do, it's what this organization does. We talk, we listen, we treat people like adults. So it's important that we support people through the process, training them, giving them the support they need to engage in adult-to-adult dialogue, to bring them together, to support them working together. The systems for doing that, and I'll talk about the systems, and I'm jumping ahead of myself, Caroline, I'm jumping ahead of myself, but the systems are in place to support and also nurture and support people. Let's not be fearful of those mental health issues. Sorry, Caroline, you come back, sorry, me again, not at all, it's great hearing you. What would be the key skills, upskilling required for resolution? Now we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let me come back to those, Caroline, because there's some great questions there. You're talking about the skills and strategies. There are 5 key skills. I'm going to want to share them with you to help you have these conversations. But I've got to get to Jonathan because Jonathan is on the line, and I've been working with him to embed mediation. So Jonathan, hi, are you there?
Yes, hello, David. Can you still hear me?
I can hear you really loud and clear. It's great to speak to you. How are you?
Yes, very well, thank you. And you?
Really well. As you can see, I'm kind of I'm going off on one, as I always do, about grievance procedures, Jonathan.
Yes.
I can't help myself. I try not to, but I'm so passionate about the damage that they do, but also the alternatives. And I can see there are loads of questions coming in. So Chris, just to say, I've noted that you've got a question there. We will come to more questions. But Jonathan, we've been working together for a little while now, so I'd like to hand over to you. We're going to do a sort of radio style interview today. So we've got some pre-prepared questions, but Jonathan, can I just hand over to yourself just to sort of paint a picture and tell people on the webinar about you and your interest in resolution.
Okay, so hello everybody. Jonathan Goodyear, my name is. I've worked in employee relations roles for coming up to 20 years this year, and I have to say I'm willing to admit up until about 2 or 3 years ago I'd always had a very traditional, safe, and dare I say rather unimaginative view of this type of thing. You know, the organisation has a grievance policy, a harassment policy, and a disciplinary policy. So that's okay then, isn't it? That gives us everything that we need to resolve all of the things that may come our way. And I guess a couple of things changed that. There was a sort of neat confluence of 2 things. One of them was the first time I met you, David. You came to, I worked for a bank at the time. You came to an interbank employee relations forum,
yeah,
and spoke to us with much the same sort of passion that you've just described there about mediation, and I think it might have been 3 years ago now, so I guess things from your perspective have evolved quite a bit since then. But I saw you present and a few light bulbs went off, because it was at the same time when I was, to a greater or lesser extent, involved in a couple of very complicated grievance cases. The sorts of cases that everybody will know and love, where there's a grievance in there somewhere, but there's also perhaps a disciplinary, there's some performance issues, there might be some absence issues. Nobody's really quite sure where the source of the conflict actually lies. And if you trace it back over the lifespan of that conflict, there's been a number of opportunities to pick it up and try and resolve it that we've missed, because we've put ourselves in the hands of this very dogmatic process that doesn't allow us to say, David, there seems to be an issue here, let me talk about it. So those two things came together, and whilst I guess I had a rather unimaginative view, I do like to think of myself as willing to learn and willing to evolve, and I sort of went away from seeing you talk to the interbank guys, and really started thinking long and hard about, yes, there must be a better way of dealing with this.
Fantastic, thank you. So what did you do? Because I remember it really well. I enjoyed the interbank forum, and I remember that it felt to me as well that banking sector was going through a lot of change at the time as well, post 2008, and real focus on values within the organisation. And I've been inspired over the last sort of 5 years with the real shift and transformation we've seen within the sort of banking and finance sector. So I was curious to know, Jonathan, what were the next steps for you to going from that light bulb moment, which might be going on for a few people here on the webinar today, saying, yeah, okay, this is making a bit of sense. What happened next? And I think you did a bit of work around evidence and business case development as well, Jonathan. So I'd love to hear a bit about that as well.
Well, yes, because I went away from hearing you talk and thinking, okay, so there looks like there's something in it here for us, but I'm not really sure how to make a case, because a lot of people will recognise in organisations that just because it feels like the right thing to do is not necessarily always compelling enough. You need to put some around it. So lo and behold, you came to my assistance again, David, by sending me a copy of your cost of conflict calculator. I think that's what you call it.
Yes, it is.
And we were able to map not just the estimated cost of the couple of particularly difficult cases, but also then the cost of the cases that we would have for a whole year, which we did some analysis on. We sort of traffic lighted them. We picked out the ones that would have elements of absence, performance, etc. We looked at the amount of management time typically each class of case would cost. And, I won't tell you what the numbers are for as much as anything, reasons of protecting the guilty, but it was a lot of money. And you took there about tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands. There were certainly a couple that fell into the latter category. So the first thing that did was help us make the case for our leaders. This is what we typically spend on managing these cases, with, by comparison, a fairly small investment in training. Obviously we pay to put a number of people through a mediation training course, but with a relatively small investment comparative to the overall cost, we can potentially make a huge saving here. So when you tie that to the perceived people benefits, the sort of more nebulous or difficult to quantify sort of emotional benefits of mediation versus a traditional grievance procedure, the case kind of makes itself.
Absolutely, thank you. And I think this is a really interesting thing, and it's it's surprisingly it's successful as well. Mediation. We look at mediation; it's successful in over 90% of cases. So not only does it have that kind of immediate benefit, also I think of resolving the conflicts, bringing parties back together. There's the financial benefit. I just wondered from having worked with mediation and introduced mediation and thinking about mediation, how do you see mediation fitting into the overall sort of toolkit for resolution, if you will, Jonathan? What benefit have you seen it deliver?
Well, I've got to say my own shift from grievance to resolution is kind of a little incomplete, because I moved organisations in the autumn of last year before we properly embedded mediation. Now, it's a different question. It was largely due to my own operational inefficiency at the time, if I'm honest. But that's another issue. I think for me the key thing. I mean, I'm going to repeat some of what you've said earlier on, really. It's very obvious that it moves the emphasis away from process, procedure, honestly, a bit of arse covering, worrying about, well, what are we going to say if I have to stand up in front of a judge? And I'm very comfortable to say, well, paragraph 3.2 of this policy says do this, and I did that, so that's okay. It completely misses the sort of human element that's involved here. It makes a binary yes/no decision and then assumes that everybody can just get back to work the following day and it'll all be all right, won't it? And in the few cases that I was able to see before I changed organisations, where we did use one of our mediators, it was resolved more quickly, far less stressfully, very much more informally, and with not even a sort of preservation or protection of the sort of relationships involved, but actually an enhancement, because there was better understanding between the people. You know, I'm a big I've sort of become later in life a big believer that no one wakes up in the morning and decides they're going to go to work to be awkward on a whim. There's a reason, and the grievance procedure often doesn't even concern itself with that reason, let alone if it recognizes it, tries to get to the bottom of it. Whereas that's one of the key parts of mediation. That's exactly what it's there for. Absolutely,
that's absolutely right. And I think it's bringing that sort of human back into the workplace, and it's so interesting when we look at the process how dehumanized now, and it's not focusing on those things that are important. So what advice would you give? Because we've got one question up. Someone's asked about Acas Code, so we'll all come back to that. But we're a little bit stuck with rigid policies and procedures. That's not always the easiest thing to shift. And there are, dare I say it, there are vested interests in maintaining the rigidity of the quasi litigation inspired processes. So it's for me it makes sense, but it's not always easy. So do you have any practical advice or thoughts for people on this webinar, Jonathan? You might be thinking, yeah, okay, let's have a little look at this. What would you advise them if you've got any advice, that is?
Well, I think the first thing I'd say is you need a little bit of patience, because you might argue differently because you've got far greater experience than me, David, but there doesn't appear to be a magic switch that you flick and from one day to the next we move from grievance process procedure to a wonderful world of mediation. It takes some time. Yes, in getting from one to the other, there's a number of things that you can do, and I think probably none of them that complicated or sort of special. There's engaging your leaders, making the case for them, and having at least one of them potentially be a public advocate for this. Yeah. Most organisations will recognise that when you want things done culturally, leadership is one of the key ways in which you start to get that embedded. I think you take a look at your policies. There's no question. Where does mediation fit in that? I mean, I've thought previously about whether or not you could actually get rid of the grievance policy. I'm sure, would add that. That's something that some organisations are perhaps a little uncomfortable with, and I certainly, on the basis of where does mediation fit whilst keeping grievance. You communicate to people regularly and often about the fact that we now have this way of dealing with conflict. You can do communications around things like little case studies, 60 seconds with a mediator, all sorts of ways you can keep the focus and the profile alive. You can train and talk to HR managers, people managers. If you've got unions, they're often a very big advocate for this. I think I was a little bit unsure about our unions at the time, because in a way it sort of does them out of a bit of a job. But to be fair, they were very, very happy with the idea of taking all of the stress out of grievances and conflict. Really, really supportive, and far more than I thought they would be. So there's a number of stakeholders that you sort of need to get on. You need to get on board. Then you get the training of the mediators. And I think I probably had underestimated how difficult, no, not difficult, how important the training was. I just sat on the first day of our training. One of your chaps did for our team, and it was unbelievably eye-opening, emotional, quite hard in a way. I have to say. So not anybody, and certainly no one that hasn't been through some of that training can be a mediator. I don't think you need to go through it to understand what's needed.
That's really, really helpful. Thank you so much. That's really some really great advice as well. Engaging the stakeholders, doing that piece of, as I said, on the evidence, slotting the mediation process in, and realizing it's hard work. And I really think that I call that modern triumvirate, the union, management, and HR function working together. And actually, in fact, what I think it does is it really creates that notion of the pluralist workplace, where those three functions are working together, Jonathan, to drive a better culture. And in some respects, whilst it might relieve the sort of transactional side of what unions and managers are working with, actually it brings them together at a much more sort of culture transformation strategic level, and therefore I think have a bigger impact across the organisation. So rather than just putting fires out all over the organisation, they're working together at a global level. And when I've been working with unions, whether it's in Royal Mail or hospitals or in other unionised environments, actually what those union reps are telling me, and managers and HR are telling me, is actually this is allowing them to have a much more significant impact across the whole for all of them. And I think that's what the modern employee is looking for. Jonathan, thank you so much. It's a pleasure as always. It's been a pleasure working with you, and thank you so much for sharing your insights and your thoughts, Jonathan, and hopefully you'll stay on the call. I've just been, while you've been doing that, trying to find out where Sarah Buckley is from Weve. Hopefully she will be on the call. I can't see her at the moment, so we've got a couple of people looking for Sarah Buckley. Here. Oh, you are there, Sarah.
Hello.
You've dialed in, have you?
I have.
I couldn't see you. Hi, how are you?
I'm good, thank you very much.
Fantastic. So what I'm going to do, Sarah, if that's okay, I'm just going to kind of do a little bit of an introduction to the Resolution Toolkit, because people are asking lots of questions about the practical elements, alignment with the Acas Code, and so on and so forth. So probably going to spend about 10 minutes, I think, just run through that, if that's okay. Then we'll come and Sarah Buckley from Weve, ER and policy lead Weve, to talk about the work you've been doing to really, I mean, transform the nature of conflict management within Weve as part of a wider cultural change program, which to me is just so exciting. So I'm looking forward to hearing, Sarah, from yourself. So if I can just move on and say thank you again, Jonathan, and we'll come to you shortly, Sarah. And here we go. So what I'd like to do now is introduce you to the sort of resolution toolkit that we've designed for organisations and are embedding in organisations. It started off very much with the resolution policy, but I've realised as we're working with organisations that there's much more than just the policy that goes with this. There's been a couple of questions about the Acas Code. So just to say, the Acas Code is a code. The Acas Code requires you to do three things as an employer, three very basic things. To offer the opportunity for your employees to meet with you, for the employee to be accompanied at the meeting, and for the employee to have an appeals process. There's no requirement whatsoever in law or in the Acas Code for an organisation to have a grievance procedure at all. There's that, and that's a fact, and that's something that I write about in the book. Lewis Silkin support, in fact, Acas have supported in the employment tribunals. In fact, they you could call it a skipping through the meadow, seeing come by our procedure as far as the tribunals are concerned. And there's another myth that often exists in the world of dispute resolution, is that the tribunals expect this to happen, and that they're focused on the code. And from my experience of working with the tribunals, they're much more focused on three things. They're focused on three things. Natural justice. Have you been fair and reasonable to your employees? Have you followed your own internal policies and procedures? Well, I'm about to set out the resolution policy. Have you followed it? Have you done the things you said you were going to do? And then have you been aligned with the Acas Code? So the tribunals really are looking for organisations to demonstrate fairness, reasonableness, and natural justice within how they resolve disputes. And the Acas Code is part of a really woefully inadequate set of public policy. In fact, I think the last time the public policy was scrutinised was when the employment tribunal fee regime was found to be unlawful and discriminatory. And if those of you on this call were found to be unlawful and discriminatory in policy making in your organisations, you probably wouldn't be working in that organisation for long. And that's the last time we had any major review of public policy in the UK. So I must confess I don't have a lot of confidence in UK public policy on conflict management, and I'm calling on Acas and the government when we come out of Brexit to really concentrate on better dispute resolution and refocusing on how we can shift towards a culture of constructive and collaborative resolution in our organisations and avoiding the really formalised and costly approaches. So yes, it complies, Sunita and others who've asked the question about that. So I'd like to just sort of draw your attention to the toolkit that we've designed for organisations. There's lots of resolution approaches. There's lots of elements to the toolkit. I'm going to run through them quickly. I won't go into everything in a lot of detail. So the first thing is to develop a resolution strategy. If conflict is so damaging, again, it seems to me to be bizarre that we don't have a strategic narrative underpinning it. So the first thing we develop with organisations and we help them to frame is a resolution strategy. That's based on evidence that's gathered through a resolution review. And the resolution review gathers quantitative and qualitative data to support the development of a resolution strategy. That goes to the board and the board sign off on the resolution strategy. So suddenly the management of conflict, the culture of resolution is a strategic priority and a strategic narrative. And the absence of a strategic narrative is singly the major cause of unresolved conflict in our workplaces. So I'll say that again, the absence of our leaders to take conflict seriously is the single biggest cause of conflict within our organisations. This is a shift in that. We then embed a resolution policy, which I'll talk about, that replaces the traditional GBH policies, grievance, bullying and harassment. Within the policy, it offers a resolution spectrum. That's a range of responses or a range of remedies that are available to your organisation, again, that I'm going to go through. Within Weve, as you'll hear, and within organisations, we develop resolution units. That can be as simple as a resolution mailbox, a resolution@company.com, or it could be a number of people sat within the ER or HR team. And I've put one of the handouts on this webinar is the development of a resolution unit. A request for resolution is the initiation document. So rather than a grievance form, you submit a request for resolution. We've crafted the request for resolution form using appreciative inquiry and positive psychology. So ask questions, what do you need? What would a fair outcome look like? What are you willing to do to support a fair outcome? And we ask people to identify which route to resolution would be most appropriate for them. The resolution index is simply the scoring system. It's an objective scoring system based on complexity, severity, longevity of the case, and that's embedded in the case management system. The routes to resolution training is, so again, Weve and many other organisations, we've done the training. That's training for unions, HR and managers. That's about how to triage cases and also act as facilitators within their organisations. Resolution reporting is about pulling out data from the case management system, from Acas Code, that will help you to measure your quality and your return on investment. And we provide an awful lot of reports through the case management system. So Acas Code, the toolkit, is a case management system. And resolution champions, these are people who are allocated as soon as a request for resolution is raised. And the resolution champions work with both parties, and they provide what I call the long nose and the long tail of resolution. They support the parties through the resolution process. They don't do the resolution, they don't mediate or facilitate. They're there to act as a support. They also support the parties for 365 days after the resolution process is concluded to build resilience and confidence with the parties. It's an amazing role, and we're developing resolution champion programs across many organisations. So the Acas Code case management system provides everything that you need to integrate a culture of resolution within your organisation. So it's case tracking, it's got every single document an organisation would need, it's got a reporting system, you can track your mediators, facilitators, your investigators, it has modules for managing your investigation processes, managing your mediation processes, managing your facilitation processes. It automates the follow-up and support for the parties once a case has been concluded, and it provides detailed reporting for the organisation, and we can customise and develop a wide range of reports. It's accessible to mediators, there's a management function, and also your employees can access it, and it incorporates e-learning content, and I'm sure Sarah will mention part of the work we've done with Weve is creating materials and e-learning content for their people. So if you're interested in discussing how to integrate a really progressive employee relations case management system that is an end-to-end solution for integrating resolution in your organization, then please let me know, and I'd love to sort of give you a more detailed view of how Apaxio works. But we're really proud of it, and we think it's going to change radically change the nature of employee relations in the UK. So the resolution strategy sets out your vision and objectives. It provides a strategic framework, and as I've mentioned, that would go to the board for sign-off. Jonathan referenced the conflict calculator. It's in my book. I'll also provide you with a copy of this, and you can assess the cost of any one conflict and do that over a number of conflicts. You start to get a mean cost of conflict. That's a really valuable baseline measure, and it's also a really valuable measure for winning hearts and minds. Because when you see the costs go from 1,000 to 10,000 plus, suddenly people wake up and smell the conflict and recognize that something needs to be done. And also it's about listening to people, going out and talking to people. And these are the people that we listen to and we talk to about their experiences. And then this gathers the qualitative data, and they're also then subsequently engaged and involved in the design and the rollout of a resolution scheme within the organization. So we're focused now on the resolution policy, which is the core part of the resolution toolkit. So it's about moving from the red to the green. Taking that red is awful, by the way. I mean, that is stressful. It's awful. I've said this already, but we've taken it out of our organisation and replacing it with non-adversarial, collaborative, supportive approaches. This isn't just hyperbole. This is real stuff happening for real people in real organisations. So there's a big shift. We don't talk the very word grievance. It makes my skin crawl. It's a horrible term that strikes fear into the heart of people. Focus instead on the outcome, the resolution. So it offers a new approach. It's radical in some senses. Some people say it's radical. Actually, I've had this debate many times. It's not actually that radical. That's the secret. Talking and listening, we've been doing that since we lived in the caves. It's only very recently we started to formalize things and stick processes over the top of issues. Actually, what the resolution policy does, dare I say it, is takes us back to basics of human relationships, engaging with each other, disagreeing, but doing so in a way which doesn't harm and hurt us. Wow, it's amazing stuff. And the resolution policy has a process map. So, you know, this is for those of you who think I'm advocating a state of anarchy in our organizations. I'm not. It's saying there are systems and processes as a mechanism, but this sets out really clearly. The request for resolution is submitted. It's subject to a triage using the resolution index, the objective criteria. And there's two big buckets. There's the green bucket, early resolution dialogue. You've still got the formal resolution. So Chris, you asked me a question about the investigations process. You can still go into the fact find, and the new resolution policy actually covers investigation and disciplinary processes. So no, Chris, you asked about doing two. You could actually just do one through the whole process. And of course, if you have an existing D&G framework or resolution and disciplinary framework, then yes, you would need to jump from one policy to another. But in essence, the overarching focus here is on early resolution, an early resolution meeting between the employee and the manager, or the employees, coaching and mentoring support, a facilitated conversation. Brilliant. Absolutely love facilitated conversations. That's the manager, an HR professional, or a union rep, or indeed a union and HR working together to bring our parties together, or indeed mediation. The investigation in more serious cases, to establish the facts, and that might push back into mediation, or you might have a formal resolution meeting, which is in old money is the name for your grievance hearing, but that's run as a restorative conference or a family group conference. So even the formal meeting is run as a problem-solving conference, drawing on sort of social work theory and sort of family group conferencing, which I'm a massive fan of, or restorative conferencing, which I've done for many years. There's the right to appeal, obviously brings us into full compliance with the Acas Code. So our appeals panels need to be aware of how to reintegrate through the resolution processes. And we provide loads of training for organisations wanting to do this, from accredited mediation skills training, which Jonathan talked about, mediation skills training for managers, core mediation skills. There's so much information, it's just not possible to cover it all on this webinar. But everything that I've talked about, we're able to support through consultancy and training. And this is what you'll get. It has a massive impact. I can't. It's somebody. Risk of overselling it. Is it a panacea? Well, if you're in conflict and you're one of your employees sat at home right now, yeah, it absolutely is a panacea for that individual. It can do so much. What I would recommend is when you're doing your strategic planning, tie it into your key strategic drivers. be that attrition, be that about talent, be that about absence, be that about mental health or well-being issues, because then you can really measure the impact of resolution aligned to your key strategic drivers. But yeah, it can do all of this and more. The antithesis, of course, is the formality. So Sarah, you've been doing this. I mean, it's been such a pleasure working with yourself and your colleagues at Aviva, and you've been really one of the leading lights in so many ways in terms of introducing resolution and making that bold shift. And I'd like to hand over to you. Do you have a slide deck, Sarah, or do you need me to hand over?
I do have a few slides. They're not particularly detailed, but yeah, I do.
The problem, are you dialing? Because I can't see you on the console in terms of having logged into the system, which is why I was struggling to see you earlier. Oh, no, I've got Sarah Bullock, but I haven't got Sarah Buckley.
No, I can see. Yeah, strange. I can do it without. It doesn't matter.
If you wanted to email them to me whilst you're talking, Sarah, I'm just going to sort of duck out for a second. Not duck out. I'll just duck off the webinar for a second and load your slides up on my screen. So do you want to just do that? Just to send those over to me while you're introducing yourself and getting set up. So forgive me for the slight inconvenience, folks, but I'm just going to duck out of the webinar myself and set Sarah's slides up on my screen. So I need to go into my Outlook system. So I'm going to pause the screen there, Sarah. You're on. I'm going to mute myself. Over to you to introduce yourself.
Fab, thank you. Thanks everybody. Nice to be here. I'm Sarah. I work at Aviva in the ER policy team, and it was my responsibility during 2018 to develop and launch our resolution procedure, which was launched on the 1st of July last year. I started working for Aviva only in January of last year, and it was my first big project, so a big responsibility, as you can tell. But prior to that, I'd worked for a number of organisations in both retail, veterinary world as well, and social housing. So, and through all that time, I've kind of specialised in employee relations and colleague engagement. So as David was talking, I took on this project and kind of not at the start really. The business case and for kind of launching resolution in Aviva had been well defined at that point, and David's been really good at explaining kind of all of the reasons why an organisation might want to introduce resolution methods in there. But I think the key piece for us was our values at Aviva are very much to put the customer first and to be able to defy uncertainty for them. And we very much felt that if you have colleagues in conflict with one another, they are not putting the customers first. So it was really, really clear to us that if we could find ways of limiting conflict, dealing with it early, and encouraging kind of open, honest conversation between colleagues, actually what we're doing is enabling our colleagues to focus on our customers and drive our business forward. So it's really, really easy and straightforward kind of business method case there for us to look at getting a resolution procedure in place. Just a little bit of kind of history then. The appetite for introducing mediation, and mediation specifically, was highlighted in early 2017, and there was lots of kind of feedback gathered on whether we thought that was a really good idea and so on, and we talked very much to our people leadership team and got their authorization, obviously, and we had budget and so on. And then we kind of looked into what mediation companies were out there, and we found David and TCM and appointed them to support us. And then we started to use their toolkit, the toolkit that David's been talking about, to define what our procedure would look like. And we went through very many iterations of what that policy and procedure would look like. And we talked a lot with Unite as well, and made sure that they were on board, and they weren't at first. They were very concerned that actually that we were proposing to remove our grievance procedure entirely. We are one of the companies that has done that, and just replaced it with a resolution procedure. And yes, Unite were very concerned about that, but after a lot of talking, I suppose, and trying to bring them around to our and David's obviously point of view, around why we don't necessarily need that grievance procedure. Then we got them on side, and they are absolutely one of our advocates now for our process. And very much for them, you know, we talk to them about the fact that instead of, you know, having their reps being able to spend all their time in grievance meetings, you know, their reps could be doing other more proactive things, should you know, their time not be spent on grievances for the entirety of the time. So yeah, they very much got on board with that. So we developed the procedure, as I said, made sure Unite had signed up to that, and then we set up our resolution team, which is an in-house team that sits within HR, part of an existing team or teams, who are our leader advice and Ask HR team. And they were, a number of colleagues from across those two teams were then trained in early resolution and facilitated conversations by TCM, by David's team. And then we recruited our mediators. And when we recruited our mediators, we recruited them from across the business. So we have got people in all of our major locations and offices across the UK, to enable people to be on site in locations where they're needed. So they were recruited and trained, and we ended up with almost 20 mediators at that point. So we trained all of our mediators, all of our resolution team, and our policy was launched 1st of July last year. And yeah, as I said, you know, we've had some challenges initially. Initially, the uptake of the mediation offering was quite low. We had a lot of pushback of people still wanting to raise a grievance, and the team had to do quite a lot of work in explaining that actually we don't have grievances any longer. We have a resolution procedure, and these are the options that you have available. And so we needed to kind of also almost do some convincing, and of colleagues to take part, and also we had to keep our mediators happy, because they were raring to go after they'd been trained, and some of them had to wait like 5 months before they got a case, so they were kind of chomping at the bit, if you like, to take part and do some mediations when we didn't have one for them. So that was a challenge, to just keep them engaged and make sure that they were happy. But I mean, I'm conscious of time and everything, but you know, in terms of some of the benefits that we're starting to see, 71% of our cases are now taking a informal resolution approach, whether that is an early conversation, a facilitated conversation, or mediation. So that is a massive difference. And you think of the time that can be spent on a grievance process. You know, an early conversation is so much quicker, as is facilitated conversation and mediation, and the associated cost of all the people involved in a grievance process versus the people involved in the resolution processes is also quite significant. So so that's really key for us, that we've seen that change. We've only got a very small amount of cases that are failing to resolve the conflict at these stages as well, so that's really beneficial for us. And you know, we're hoping to continue to see that the resolution process is really successful, as it has been so far, going forward as well. David, is there anything else you wanted me to cover? I mean, I'm conscious of time and everything for you.
No, I think that's been really great. I think you've talked through the processes and the challenges. I think it's been really kind of great to hear a nice, honest appraisal of the challenges. It's not always easy, but kind of having had that sort of resilience and that overarching kind of focus on resolution, to hear that positive outcome and the use of resolution and the savings have been fantastic. And I guess if I had other questions, they'd be sort of about how this fitted in and dovetailed with other sort of factors in terms of cultural change. But we're working collaboratively, Sarah, for a conference in October, on the 29th of October, where yourself and others will be sharing their experiences to the UK civil service. We've got Capgemini, Metropolitan Police, yourself, ourselves, and others sharing their experiences. So that's probably a place for us to take a wider look. But for now, in terms of the focus on resolution, amazing. I mean, for me, one of the things I think that stood out for me when I first met Anthony Fitzpatrick, the head of ER and policy, he said to me that he wanted your overarching focus was to allow people to bring the weekend version of themselves. But what that spoke to me about was authentic, honest, bring the whole you to work.
Absolutely.
And I work with a lot of organisations, and I must say, Weve have been one that have stood out for me, that have really followed on that commitment to create authentic, honest conversations where people can be the best version of themselves, and resolution's been part of that. So it's really been a standout feature for me, really, Sarah.
Yeah, I agree.
Thank you so much. We look forward to carrying on the conversation, and conscious of time. If you've got any questions, please do feel free to ask them through the pen. I'm going to draw the webinar to a conclusion now, but I'm going to say a massive thank you to Jonathan Goodyear and to Sarah Buckley for your informative and inspiring presentations today. I really hope that the attendees on the webinar have found it useful. As yourself, Sarah, I'm conscious of time, so I'm going to move forward. If there's any questions, please do feel free to ask them. There's an opportunity as well to email me questions. I'm all over LinkedIn talking about this stuff. I'm really happy to respond to email questions, and I'm more than happy to pick up my laptop, come to your organisation and sit in amongst it, sit down with some of your colleagues, bring the doubters, the skeptics, the naysayers. I'm sure there's not many of them, but whoever you like, and I'm more than happy to come in and have a conversation about conflict and a dialogue about disputes within within your own organisations. Please just let me know. But if you've got any other questions, feel free to ask them, and I'll do my best to answer them. So again, this is what we do. We're a great company. We provide mediation support. We help to set up in-house mediation schemes, accredited mediation for trainers, for mediation skills training. We develop people and culture strategies and everything that underpin those. We develop employee handbooks. We've got a couple of organisations we're developing their employee handbooks for. We try and get our policies onto two sides of paper. It's not always easy. But anyway, what we do is we reduce the burden on the rainforests in terms of the amount of paper that goes into employee handbooks. So what we're really good at doing is reducing the size, the clutter, and the formality of employee handbooks. So we undertake whole organisation or department reviews of bullying and harassment and conflict. As I've mentioned, Gary Rogers, he's joining us on the 1st of July as our head of investigation and audit services. So I've got someone now to lead that part of the business, to undertake investigations, neutral evaluations and audits for our clients, and we do that to a very high standard. And of course, at the bottom there, we help to integrate and develop resolution policies and resolution strategies within our organisations. And the Acas system that I've introduced today, the case management system, is the way of delivering that. And again, if you're interested in looking at Acas, either as a standalone case management system for your ER function or to integrate it into your existing ER case management systems, please let me know, because we're really excited about bringing that to organisations. And finally, we develop really interesting and bespoke leadership and management training around values-based leadership. And as I mentioned, I was with the NHS board yesterday delivering a programme around compassionate management and leading with values, which was incredibly exciting. So a couple of questions. So a couple of questions. As despite the best intentions to resolve issues through dialogue, some employees just want. Oh no, I've answered that one already, so forgive me. Are you able to provide advice on how to get organisations to ditch the often quick fix? The quick fix, or thought of as that grievance policy, and spend the time needed for resolution and necessarily so? That's a great question, Catherine. Thank you. I think we need to do the evidence-based, lead with the evidence. So the quick fix might appear to be a quick fix, but Catherine, I'm sure many on this webinar will know it's not a quick fix. It actually, brushing under the carpet or trying to do a quick fix will bubble up. I call it conflict creep. It will creep along for a bit and then bubble up. and the bubbling up, then it costs more money and takes up more time. We can evidence that, we can track it and evidence it. Then we go back to the people who promote quick fix and give them the evidence of the impact. And sometimes you get this wonderful sound effect. I didn't realize that was what the outcome was when I pinged that email off and told them to shut up, whatever, I don't know. So no, it's about using the evidence to inform decision making and to really help people to buy into that. So in conclusion, be innovative. There really has never been a better time to be innovative. As I said, if we follow public policy, we'll spend all our lives in the tribunals. So we need to be innovative, and the public policy allows for an enormous amount of innovation. And I just wish that Acas and the government were more open in instilling confidence within the HR and ER community that you can be innovative and creative. Actively encourage cooperative problem solving, bringing the HR employee and management function together collaboratively under that pluralist agenda is so powerful. Bringing your values to life through your HR policies and your leadership competences. Investing in your managers and leaders to ask those questions, to be empathetic, to be able to identify win-win outcomes to difficult situations. And join the resolution revolution. Yeah, you'll never look back. That's me. I'd love to connect with you if we're not connected. I'd love to carry on the conversation. I'm passionate about this. I know many of you are passionate about this as well. And for now, I can say I'm just looking out my window here. The sky is blue, it's sunny. I am looking forward to, and my throat's held up as well, so I'm pleased about that. But for now, I'm going to say a massive thank you for joining TCM's webinar today, and look forward to welcoming you to the next webinar, or indeed responding to any questions or requests for me to come and have a cup of coffee with you, which I'd love to do. So, but for now, thank you, and Jonathan and Sarah, a huge thank you to you also. Cheerio, and enjoy the rest of your day. Bye-bye.